Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karabhavai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om, peace, peace, peace. Did I move this closer? Yeah. So we don't get an echo. All right, so welcome again. We are reading from the Tales and Parables of Sri Ramakrishna. And as we mentioned before, many of these you find in the Gospel, but some of them you don't, because they were recorded by all the different people who would listen to Sri Ramakrishna, not just him, and they would all remember which parables and tales that they liked the best and so forth. And that's the function of tales and parables, is that they make teaching stick, rather than just having a particular lesson. If you tell a story, people remember things better. So great teachers like Sri Ramakrishna, and of course we saw that with Jesus as well, would teach with parables. All right, let's look at the first one tonight, and Atma's going to read us about the power, no, let's see, what is it? The taking back to the mother, right?
Back to the Divine Mother. A devotee who is born with an element of Vishnu cannot altogether
get rid of bhakti. Once I fell into the clutches of a jnani. Made me listen to Vedanta for 11 months. But he could not altogether destroy the seed of bhakti in me. No matter where my mind wandered, it would come back to the Divine Mother. And whenever I sang to her, Nangta would weep and say, "Oh, what is this?" You see, he was such a great jnani, and still he wept. Remember the popular saying that if a man drinks the juice of the alet creeper, a plant grows inside his stomach. And once the seed of bhakti is sown, the effect is inevitable. It will gradually grow into a tree with flowers and fruits. Now you may reason and argue 1,000 times, but if you have the seed of bhakti within you, you will surely come back to Hari.
Yes, of course, he was referring to the time when he was studying with Totopuri, who was the great jnani that taught him. And of course, many times you find different people talking about, whether they're a jnani or a bhakti or something. And but what I find that in the Ramakrishna tradition, generally speaking, there's always a blending of the two, whether people like to admit it or not. And even those who claim to be the great jnanis are extremely devoted to their teachers and to Sri Ramakrishna for his teachings, and for Swami Vivekananda and his teachings and so forth. And so even one who prescribes to the path of jnana becomes a bhakta because of his devotion to those who give him those teachings. So one way or the other, we're all bhaktas of a sort, one way or another. And so, of course, Sri Ramakrishna and his direct disciples all emphasized trying to blend the yogas to create the most harmonious and productive spiritual path. And indeed, we go through different moods. We sometimes feel more devotional, and sometimes we feel more intellectual and so forth. So it's really nice to be in a tradition where you can be able to cultivate all sides of your personality and not just one. All right, let's read the next one.
Conceit is to devotion what canker is to buds. Once upon a time, conceit entered into the heart of Narada. He thought there was no greater devotee than himself. Reading his heart, the Lord said, "Oh, Narada, go to such and such a place. A great devotee of mine is living there. Cultivate his acquaintance, for he is truly devoted to me." And Narada went there and found an agriculturist who rose early in the morning and pronounced the name of Hari only once. And taking his plow, he went out and tilled the ground all day long. Night he went to bed after pronouncing the name of Hari once more. Narada said to himself, "How can this rustic be a lover of God? Why, I see him busily engaged in worldly duties. He has no signs of a pious man about him." Then Narada went back to the Lord and spoke what he thought of his new acquaintance. Thereupon the Lord said, "Narada, take this cup of oil and go round the city and come back with it. But take care that you do not spill even a single drop of the oil." Narada did it as he was told. And on his return, the Lord asked him, "Well, Narada, how many times did you remember me in the course of your walk around the city?" "Oh, not once, my Lord," said Narada. "Well, how could I, when I had to watch this cup brimming over with oil?" And then the Lord said, "This one cup of oil did so divert your attention that you even did forget me altogether? And look at that rustic. Though carrying the heavy burden of a family, he still remembers me twice every day."
So we can all take comfort in the fact that maybe we can't remember the Lord all the time. That's kind of our goal, is to put God in everything that we do and everything that we see and everything that we hear about, and to repeat the name of the Lord as much as possible. But we often do find that we forget because we get so involved in all the things we have to do. So we can take heart that even Narada couldn't manage it at all, and the Sri Ramakrishna is praising the man that could at least do it twice, once in the morning and once in the evening. And it's a good practice too. When you're doing your meditation, you can then kind of rededicate everything that happened during the day to the Lord, even if you couldn't remember him at all of those particular times. You can at least go backwards in time in the evening. That's really the kind of the function of arati. We use the 5 elements to represent everything in the world, and so we're rededicating everything that we've done during the day back to the Lord with this symbol of the 5 elements. And so, one way or the other, we can get back to it. It's interesting. This is a second example we found where even once or twice is enough. Remember how the sage was reprimanded by having suggested that someone needed to repeat the name of the Lord 3 times in order to get an effect. And his teacher said, "Why, so little faith in the name? Once should do it." So, all right, let's go on with God alone is the giver.
When Akbar was the emperor of Delhi, there lived a hermit in a hut in the forest. Many people visited the holy man. At one time, he felt a great desire to entertain his visitors. How could he do it? So, he didn't have any money. So, he decided to go to the emperor for help. For the gate of Akbar's palace was always open to holy men. The hermit entered the palace. The emperor was at his daily devotions. And the hermit took a seat in a corner of the room, and he heard the emperor conclude his worship with a prayer. "Oh God, give me money, give me riches," so on and so forth. When the hermit heard this, he was about to leave the prayer hall. The emperor, he signed, wait. When the prayer was over, the emperor came over to him. "You came to see me. How is it that you were about to leave without saying anything to me?" "Oh, your majesty need not trouble yourself about it," answered the hermit. "I must leave now." When the emperor insisted, the hermit said, "Many people visit my hut, so I came here to ask you for some money." "Then," said the emperor, "why were you going away without speaking to me?" "I found that you too were a beggar. You too prayed to God for money and riches. Thereupon I said to myself, well, why should I beg of a beggar? If I must beg, let me beg of God."
And of course, it also brings up the point that here's Akbar with all his wealth, and he's still praying for more and more. Things like that seem to be insatiable. So that's another teaching of this parable. But of course, the idea here is that no point in praying for just simple things in the world. Might as well pray for the ultimate from God. And so you don't need to pray to God for money and things, but pray to him for devotion and knowledge of the truth. All right, "No beggar I for common fruit" is the next one.
Remember Ramakrishna speaking. Just imagine Hanuman's state of mind. He didn't care for money, honor, creature comforts, or anything else. He longed only for God. When he was running away with the heavenly weapon that had been secreted in the crystal pillar, Mandanar began to tempt him with various fruits so that he might come down and drop the weapon. He couldn't be tricked so easily. In reply to her persuasions, he sang the song. "Am I in need of fruit? I have the fruit that makes this life fruitful indeed. Within my heart, the tree of Rama grows, bearing salvation for its fruits. Under the wish-fulfilling tree of Rama do I sit at ease, plucking whatever fruit I will. But if you speak of fruit, no beggar I for common fruit. Behold, I go, leaving a bitter fruit for you."
So, of course, this is when Hanuman would have been in Ravana's court, and Mandodari, being the wife of Ravana, was trying to distract him to drop his weapon, but he wasn't going to have anything to do with it. So he knew her tricks, and so he wasn't going to be begging for a common fruit, because he knew what the real goal of life was, and that was keeping his devotion to Rama and Sita, and wasn't going to be distracted by mere fruits. All right, let's go on with the next one.
"Thorns denied prick no less keenly. Once finding it difficult to reconcile the contradictory doctrine of man's free will and God's grace, 2 disciples of the Master went to him for a solution of this. The Master said, 'Why do you talk of free will? Everything is dependent upon the Lord's will. Our will is tied to the Lord's like the cow to its tether. No doubt we have a certain amount of freedom or even as the cow has within a prescribed circle. So man thinks that his will is free, but he knows that his will is dependent on the Lord's. The disciples say, "Is there then no necessity of practicing penance or meditation and the rest? Why, for one can as well just sit quiet and say, it's all God's will. Whatever is done, done at his will." But Sri Ramakrishna, oh, to what effect if you simply say that in so many words? Any amount of your verbal denial of thorns can never save you from their painful prick when you place your hand on the thorns. Had it been entirely with man to do spiritual practices according to his will, everybody would have done so. But no, everyone cannot do it. And why? There is one thing. If you don't utilize properly the amount of strength that God has given you, he never gives more. And that is why self-exertion is necessary. And so everyone has to struggle hard even to become fit for the grace of God. By such endeavor, and through his grace, the sufferings of many lives can be worked out in one life. But some self-effort is absolutely necessary. Let me tell you a story. Once Vishnu, the Lord of Golaka, cursed Narada, saying that he would be thrown into hell. This Narada was greatly disturbed in his mind, and he prayed to the Lord, singing songs of devotion, begging him to show where hell is and how one can go there. Vishnu then drew the map of the universe on the ground with a piece of chalk, representing the exact position of heaven and hell. Then Narada said, pointing to the part marked hell, "Is it like this? This is hell then?" So saying, he rolled himself on the spot and exclaimed he had undergone all the sufferings of hell. Vishnu smilingly asked, "Well, how's that?" Narada replied, "My Lord, are not heaven and hell thy creation? When thou didst draw the map of the universe thyself and point out to me the hell in the plan, then that place became a real hell. And as I rolled myself there, my sufferings were intense. So I do say that I've undergone the punishments of hell." And Narada said all this sincerely. And so Vishnu was satisfied with the explanation.
Yeah, lots of little teachings in this one. First of all, this idea of free will and everything is the Lord's will. And again and again, we come to the conclusion that while you're still immersed in the play of Maya, you have to assume that you have to still make some effort. You can't just say that everything is by the will of the Lord and sit and do nothing. You have to still make some efforts, because it's like playing a game. You can't sit there and play a game of chess and not use the rules of chess, or play bridge and not play by the rules of bridge. Whatever game it is you're playing, you're supposed to abide by the rules. And part of the rules of the game of Maya is that the embodied beings have to assume a certain amount of responsibility. But ultimately, of course, everything is the will of the Lord. But we would like the will of the Lord to be bent a little bit this way or that way, and so we make some effort so that the Lord will see that we're pulling on that tied string that's tied to a pole really hard in this direction towards Him, and so He'll move that fixed peg that the rope is tied to a little bit closer every day. So this is really the idea here. And you know, you see this in real life with people that have We don't all have an infinite number of strengths and abilities, but we have to use the ones that we have to the best of our ability. And then we see good examples of that when we see people with certain handicaps that have overcome their handicaps and have achieved great things simply because they didn't give up. And then, of course, you see the opposite. You see people that just say, well, can't do anything. I've got this handicap, so I'll just sit here and do nothing. And so their lives don't go anywhere and they don't achieve anything. And they usually end up being miserable and talking about how horrible the world is because they don't seem to have all the abilities that the next person has. So this is a real trap that people get into when they try to just assume that everything is the will of the Lord, and so they're not going to bother to do anything. So, and like we mentioned before in that parable where the man tried to get out of his punishment by saying everything was the will of Rama, and so the judge said, well, by the will of Rama, I'll sentence you to jail. So that's really the difficulty. If you put everything on the will of the Lord, you've got to be expecting that he'll, by his will, he will give you some suffering. And so you have to be careful. All right, let's talk about single-mindedness as another name for devotion.
The fisherman was fishing in a lake all by himself. After a long while, the float began to move, and now and then its tip touched the water. The fisherman was holding the rod tight in his hands, ready to pull it up, when a passerby stopped and said, Sir, you tell me where Mr. Banerjee lives. No reply from the fisherman. Was just on the point of pulling up the rod. The stranger said to him, Sir, can you tell me where Mr. Banerjee lives? The fisherman was unconscious of everything around him. His hands were trembling. His eyes were on the float. The stranger was annoyed and went on. When he had gone quite a way, the fisherman's float sank under water, and with one pull of the rod, he landed the fish. He wiped the sweat from his face with his towel and shouted, Oh, hey, come here, listen. The man would not turn his face. After much shouting, however, he came back and said to the fisherman, Why are you shouting at me? Oh, I'm sorry. What did you ask me about? Said the fisherman. And he said, well, I repeated the question so many times, and now you're asking me to repeat it once more? Well, at that time, my float was about to sink, so I did not hear a word of what you said. A man can achieve such single-mindedness in meditation that he will see nothing, hear nothing. He will not be conscious even of touch. A snake may crawl over his body, but he will not know it. And neither of them will be aware of the other.
Yeah, we've heard the stories about how great people like Vivekananda and other great souls meditating, and they might be covered with mosquitoes or covered with ants and so forth. So this is the state, and wouldn't that be nice to be able to reach that state in meditation where absolutely nothing distracted you? The neighbor's cell phone going off, or the wind outside rattling the trees against the window, or whatever it is. So we're so easily distracted. So this metaphor of the fisherman is a good one if you've ever fished. I'm not sure it works terribly well if you don't spend a lot of time fishing, but you can imagine the one-pointed concentration that this fisherman had. And so perhaps in our meditation, if we can try to duplicate that feeling of complete focus on one thing, you can feel that your mantra is your fishing line and hook, and you're trying to hook the Lord with your japam. And so you're washing that fishing line and that hook intensely as you repeat the mantra, expecting any moment to hook the divine and become one with it. And with that focus of your mind, keeping your meditation one-pointed and not getting distracted by all the little things around you, the aches and pains of the body and the disturbances in the surroundings and so forth. All right, we're going to yearning, which has a lot to do with keeping your attention in one place. So to have genuine yearning for God is to attain him.
A man had a daughter who became a widow when she was very young. She'd never known her husband. She noticed the husbands of other girls and said one day to her father, "Where's my husband?" The father replied, "Govinda is your husband. He will come to you if you call him." With these words, the girl went to her room and closed the door and cried to Govinda, saying, "Oh, Govinda, come to me. Show yourself to me. Why don't you come?" And God could not resist the girl's piteous cry and appeared before her.
Similar to the parable we read before, where the child was told to call on his brother in the forest, Brother Krishna in the forest, as he was passing through it in order to help him get through the dangerous journey. And he took it very literally with great faith and assumed that there was a brother that was going to come appear, and finally the Lord did appear. And there's the story of the child who was told to feed the deity while the parents were away, and he genuinely expected the deity to come receive the food. And then eventually the deity had to succumb to his yearning and accept his offering. I remember one person described the food offering as nivedatam, dedicated, so the food was dedicated to God. And he didn't really have the idea that God was actually partaking of the food. But of course, in our tradition, we have the testimony of Sri Ramakrishna that the energy actually comes out of the deity's eyes and comes and enjoys the food at the subtle level and leaves its divine impression on it. So we can rest assured that there is a partaking of the food on the subtle level. All right, here's the next one, the divine yearning.
God cannot be seen without yearning of heart. And this yearning is impossible unless one has finished with the experiences of life. Those who live surrounded by women in gold and have not yet come to the end of their experiences, they do not yearn for God. When I lived at Kamarpur, Bridoy's son, a child of 4 or 5 years old, he used to spend the whole day with me. He played with his toys. He almost forgot everything else. But no sooner did evening come, then he would say, "I want to go to my mother." I would try to cajole him in various ways and say, "Oh, here, I'll give you a pigeon." But he wouldn't be consoled with such things, and he'd weep and cry, "I want to go to my mother." He didn't enjoy playing anymore. I myself, I wept to see his state. One should cry for God that way, like a child. That is what it means to be restless for God. One doesn't enjoy play or food any longer. After one's experiences of the world are over, one feels restlessness and weeps for God.
You know, and we also, if we look back on our our lives and we think back when we were little kids and the things we used to enjoy doing, you realize that you just wouldn't enjoy those now. It's just not the kinds of things you would enjoy. Or even looking back a few years and thinking of the things you might have found enjoyable and then realize that they're just not really all that enjoyable anymore. Because we mature and our desires mature, and hopefully our desires mature in a way that gets us around to desiring God and nothing else. But we had a reading this morning about Holy Mother, talking about different temperaments of people. And she had to explain that, some people just aren't ready for a deep yearning for God yet. They haven't experienced enough things in the world in order to reach that. So I have to keep the teaching simple for them. But other people are much more tuned to the yearning for God, and I can give them more explicit instructions. And so this is really what we have to keep in mind, is just that we have to have been through a lot of experiences of life in order to reach this stage. Swami Prabhupada used to say that the people that came here have already experienced all sorts of lifetimes where they've been very rich and very poor, very powerful and very powerless, and very talented and not talented, had to experience all of those different things through many different lifetimes. And so eventually, once all those different kinds of lifetimes have been realized, then the real yearning for God can come. All right, next one. If you are earnest.
A man may not know the right path, but if he has bhakti and the desire to know God, then he attains him through the force of sheer bhakti. Once a sincere devotee set out on a pilgrimage to the temple of Jagannath in Puri. He did not know the way, and he went west instead of south. He no doubt strayed from the right path, but always eagerly asked people the way, and they gave him the right directions. Now, this is not the path. Follow that one. And at last the devotee was able to get to Puri and worship the deity. So you see, even if you're ignorant, someone will tell you the way if you are really earnest.
And I think that someone is often the Lord himself, seeing that you are sincerely trying to find him, even if you're doing things in a untraditional way. Eventually he will keep gently correcting you so that you will get back onto the path. And, sometimes paths for different people are very different. And so following one person's path doesn't necessarily get you to the goal as quickly as following a different path. And I can use a good example from here, because depending on the time of day, you could tell somebody that the easiest way to get to the airport is to go south on the 101 and south on the 110 and then west on the 105. Or you could tell them to go north on the 101 and south on the 405. So now if they were hearing you, they'd say, well, you just told him to go south on the 101, and you're telling me to go north on the 101. Of course, the 101 really goes east and west at that point. So that's doubly confusing. You see the signs, and half the time they'll say east and west, and half the time they'll say north and south. But of course, both of those ways get you there. Depending on the time of day, one way might be better than the other. And then, of course, you get good old GPS that might tell you to take some non-existent dirt road or something. So you have to hope that your God GPS is tuned in and not some other kind of GPS. All right, how about self-help and self-surrender, which we kind of touched on earlier here on the
This is how our Guru taught his disciples to see God.
Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, how our Guru taught his disciples to see God. Before I skipped one.
The disciple asked his teacher, "Sir, please tell me how I can see God." "Then come with me," said the guru. "I shall show you." Took the disciple to a lake. Both of them got into the water. And suddenly the teacher pressed the disciple's head under the water. And after a few moments, he released him. The disciple raised his head and stood up. The guru asked him, "Now, how did you feel?" The disciple said, "Oh, I thought I should die. I was panting for breath." The teacher said, "Well, when you feel like that for God, then you will know that you have not long to wait for his vision."
I think virtually every Swami I've heard in this temple, and that stretches over 69 years, has told that story. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that particular parable repeated. So it's one that we have to remember, since it's repeated so often. That's a clue. Remember this one. And so it's that level of yearning that we have to realize. And you can do it by feeling how you're drowning in the world. The world can really feel like it's overwhelming you sometimes, especially if you listen to the news and you really feel like the world's overwhelming you. It can be very depressing to listen to the news. You have to eventually learn to turn it off. But that can really give you that overwhelming, drowning feeling, and get you to search for the Lord. One time, a visitor asked one of the monks why he read the newspaper. He says, "It gives me more dispassion." All right, self-help and self-surrender.
The father was once passing through a field with his two little sons. He was carrying one of them in his arms, while the other was walking along but behind him, holding his hand. They saw a kite flying. The latter boy, giving up his hold on his father's hand, he began to clap his hands with joy, crying, "Oh, behold, Papa, there's a kite!" But immediately he stumbled down and got hurt. And the boy who was carried by the father, he also clapped his hands with joy. He did not fall. His father was holding him. The first boy represents self-help in spiritual matters, and the second, self-surrender.
And we really need both. We have to make an effort, but we also need to keep clinging to the Lord, because we know we can't do everything. But our effort shows the Lord of our intentions. And so really you have to have both. You can't, again, you don't want to be just thinking, well, the Lord's going to do everything. I'll just sit here and he's going to carry me. You have to have an element of that, but you have to balance it with also, well, you have to hold on. You have to hold on. So you've still got self-effort. You got to hold on to his back or hold on to his hand, one way or the other. So there's still an element of self-effort. All right, we have time for at least one more. Let's see. Lord Narayana and his self-defending devotee.
Once Lakshmi and Narayana were seated in Vaikuntha. Narayana suddenly stood up. Lakshmi had been stroking his feet, and she said, "Why, Lord, where are you going?" And Narayana answered, "Why, one of my devotees is in great danger. I must save him." With these words, he left, but he came back immediately. Lakshmi said, "Why, Lord, why have you returned so soon?" Narayana smiled. But the devotee, he was going along the road overwhelmed with love for me. Some washermen were drying clothes on the grass. The devotee walked over the clothes. And at this, the washermen chased him and were going to beat him with their sticks, so I ran out to protect him. "But why have you come back?" asked Lakshmi. Narayana laughed. Well, I saw the devotee himself picking up a brick to throw at them. So I came back.
Now this is sort of the opposite of the one we read about the three men who were being chased by the tiger. And in that one, he was praising the last one who didn't want to bother God when he could do something himself. But in this one, we're seeing that the Lord doesn't bother to come if you're going to help yourself. So it's a little bit of a conundrum, but again, I think it's a balance that we have to play. If you can do something yourself, you probably do need to make the effort, but you always have to remember that the Lord will be backing you up there when you need it. All right, maybe one more. Self-surrender knows no complaint.
When Rama and Lakshmana went to take their bath in Pampa Lake, they thrust their bows into the ground. And coming out of the water, Lakshmana took out his bow. He found its tip stained with blood. Rama said to him, "Look, brother, look. Perhaps we've hurt some creature." Lakshmana dug in the earth and found a big bullfrog, and it was dying. Rama said to the frog, "Well, why didn't you croak?" "Well, we should have tried to save you. You croak lustily enough when you're in the jaws of a snake." The frog said, "Oh, Lord, when I'm attacked by a snake, I croak, saying, 'Oh, Rama, save me.' But this time, I found that it was Rama himself who was killing me, so I kept still."
And of course, when you read the Chandi, you find that when even the asuras are being slain by the Divine Mother, they're being sent to heaven. So being killed by an avatar or a god or a goddess, you are getting liberated or at least sent to heaven, which isn't exactly the same as liberation, but it's a step in the right direction. You get the benefit of that. So the frog was a true devotee, and so he isn't going to complain if Rama's arrow happened to hit him by accident. He's not going to complain. He died at the hands of the Lord, and so he is completely surrendered to whatever the Lord dishes out. All right, well, that's probably enough for tonight. We have a big weekend coming up, so hopefully you can join us one way or the other for the puja celebrating Holy Mother Sri Sarada Devi's birthday. And that will be Sunday, starting around 10. And we do the elaborate 16-item puja, and then we'll do a homa fire, then there's prasad, and then there'll be some musical entertainment and chanting, and some talks by the swamis in the afternoon, and the special arati in the evening, where all those that are still here will get to receive some prasad flowers and get touched by the sacred relics that are kept here in our temple. So I don't think there are any other centers that do that except the ones in Southern California. So if you're here, you must take the opportunity. All right. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace.